Welcome back to the Scouting Report. Today, let's take a look at Onslaught to Orsha 2 by Bounding Fire Productions. This is the second version of this historical action. I never got the opportunity to see the original, and this one just arrived yesterday. I pre-ordered it, I think, late last year, sometime around Black Friday time. I believe I pre-ordered it and it just arrived. So it is pretty hefty. I'm going to go through it real quick. You can see all the contents. What isn't in this pack that I already opened is the maps for the historical portion. I have them set up on the table over there, and I'm going to tag those on at the end to show you what it looks like all folded out. And I'll go through the rest of that here in a second. One thing that always impresses me with some of these third-party produced ASL products is the level of quality. Not particularly critical hit. I own a few critical hit things that I've mainly bought used off of eBay out of curiosity that center around Normandy, which I have a lot of interest in that action, like a lot of people do. The level of critical hit products is well below Bounding Fire Productions and Lone Canuck Publishing and the LFT products. And you see the level of quality here is quite high. Obviously it isn't shipped in a box like a Multiman Publishing, but it is shipped in a shrink wrap. And then you have to figure out how to package it yourself later on. I usually split them up into two baggies essentially and store it that way in magazine holders. So let's run through this real quick. So Onslaught to Orsha 2, Operation Bagration. I'm probably completely pronouncing that wrong. Huge Soviet offensive on the Germans in early summer 1944, basically. And there are quite a few components to this. Lots of scenarios, lots of maps, and campaign games. And there's even actually, I think, two solo. So I swear, every time I do a video, there's somebody at the door that I'm not going to answer. So what we have here are the two campaign force organizers for the Russians and the Germans, and the roster. And this is pretty cool. This reminds me of a Multiman Publishing fold-out reference card. It's very cool. You can put it in a notebook. You can put all these in a notebook. Very handy when playing the campaign game. It's got special rules for things like mine roller tanks. They have their own updated, I assume these are updated, and I assume they were included in the original Onslaught to Orsha. Vehicle ordnance notes, including a full table, very similar to Chapter H for both Russian and German. Not very many German vehicles, it's mostly Russians. Very handy, very cool. Here we have special rules for, I think I skipped a sheet. Yeah, no wonder. Rules for aircraft operation during the historical action. Air support must have been very important during that offensive. So about 6 pages of aircraft rules. And then we get right into the special rules for Onslaught to Orsha 2. And there's actually somewhere in here I saw there's a large section on the mine tanks as well. Maybe I skipped that already. But there are, oh geez, 15, more than that, 20 pages of rules. It has its own index, which is handy, towards the end. Oh, here are the solo ASL missions. There's one called Breakthrough to Orsha, solitary ASL, and one called the Crossroads. And random events for the missions, solo ASL missions. Planning map of the historical map, which has some interesting features now that I have it laid out. And here we've got 32 scenarios that take place on standard ASL geomorphic boards, as well as some Bounding Fire Production custom geomorphic boards, as well as on the historical map that I have set up over there. One thing to notice about all of these scenarios and the rules pages, they're printed on high quality, color glossy paper. This is a thicker cardstock than the regular rule pages that I went through, but it's all really nice, glossy, full color printing. So very cool. Production quality is top notch. So hats off to Bounding Fire Productions. And there's a mix of scenarios in here. There's some that are, 5 turns long. There's one that's 5.5, 6 turns, 2 6 turns. So there's some that aren't really overwhelming, but there are some bigger scenarios as well. It's a nice mix of scenarios. But you have to like German versus Russian scenarios, because that's all you're going to get in Onslaught to Orsha. That's what that entire thing is about. And then we get into Bounding Fire Production counters, which are always top notch. Let's see if I can get a nice close up here. Full color, excellent die cutting, centered. Some of the best counters that I've ever seen. The supplier they use to do this, I'm not sure who it is, but they do a great job. And if you look at the die cutting, it makes it very easy to punch these out and very easy to trim and make them nice and clean. Because we all love our beautiful counters, or some of us do. Some of us obsess about it. Here's Russian infantry and German infantry. The color on the Russians is a little bit different than the standard multi-man publishing, but you wouldn't mistake it for a completely different nationality. It's just a little bit different than the official color. Again, printing quality is good, nice and centered, full color. Got the little Bounding Fire Production text on all the counters. So if you're into collecting custom counters from various vendors, various third-party producers, you won't mix them up. Although I don't think you would, because when you see these that they're Bounding Fire Production just from the quality level. So great. Some more Russians and some aircraft. And then here we've got there's 4 custom geomorphic boards that are Bounding Fire Production. There's a mix here. What do we got here? We've got board DW 8A. And one thing I noticed about these boards is, they're pretty nice boards. The color is a little bit washed out if you set it next to a multi-man publishing. It's not too far off, but it's just a little bit more muted than the official mat board. So here you've got a mix of hills, grain, and water. DWB. Basically, it's a similar board, just the terrain's been changed a little bit. flip like this. And then you've got DW 9A and 9B. Let me look at this real quick. Oh, I see. 8B and 9B, they're basically one has a water feature. 8B and 9B does not have the water feature or the grain. They're slightly different. And it's probably the same. I think these are the first Geomorphic boards I've received from Bounty Fire Productions, so I'm not quite used to it. Yeah, this is, so 8A and 9B are similar as well, except there's a water feature and slightly different. No, the grains are all the same. It's just the water feature, and the roads are a little bit. No, the roads aren't even different. Only the water feature and the marsh or brush. And then another planning map in the back sheet. So in total on the back sheet, you've got, like I said, 32 scenarios, 2 solitaire ASL, 370 half-inch die cut, 384 5/8 inch, 2 22 by 27 and 1 28 by 27 historical sheets, which I'll show you in a minute. I'll cut those in after I've finished with this. Rules pages, campaign game pages, chapter H type pages, and then 2 16 by 22 double wide boards, 8A, B, and 9A and B. And then again, the campaign game scenario cards. So let me pause here and we'll cut over and take a look at the full historical map. So here we are looking at the Onslaught to Orsha historical map. I've got them laid out. They're not flat, obviously. They still have all the fold marks in them, but that's okay. So we're on the Smolensk-Minsk Railroad in Belarusia, June 23rd and 24th, 1944. These basically have oversized hexes, which is nice, always nice for campaign games. We got a rail section running almost dead center. It probably is dead center down the board. Lots of shell holes, lots of interesting line of sights. Mainly open ground with some grain and orchards, but I suspect that there's a lot of fun armor action that can take place on this map. Not a lot of buildings, not a lot of cover from buildings or woods. It's primarily open ground, orchards, and a little bit of grain. Let me come over to this side. Yeah, there's not many woods, just a sprinkling of woods throughout the whole mainly open board or open map. Now, one thing to notice, at least on my printing, all 3 panels just have a slightly off in their green background. You can see here where it overlaps between this sheet and this sheet. Slightly different green, and then on this one is even more. I know it's hard in the printing process. You know, you probably print batches of this sheet. You know, you print 300 of them, whatever it is, and then this one and this one, and ink tones can change a little bit. So I try not to be too nitpicky in that regard. It's just something I noticed. And the other thing I noticed, which I'm curious about, is the huge amount of overlap to get things to match up. So if you look at each map sheet, nearly a half, easily a third, is overlap on each one. Clearly, I'm not a ASL module or game designer. I didn't look at the scenarios close enough to know if there's a reason for this, but I would think that they could have easily had this as 2 sheets instead of 3. Now, maybe there are some scenarios that take place on, just on 1 sheet. And they sized it so you don't have to have 2 sheets out and overlap to play, right? So if there's an action in this area, you could get away with just using this sheet instead of having to, layer them up just to get that little bit extra of terrain. I didn't go through the scenarios to notice where some of them might have taken place on any of these maps, but I just thought that was curious why there's so much overlap in these maps. Nearly half, easily a third, like I said. Other than that, it's a nice big map. Folds up nicely, and it looks like it'll make for a lot of action. So that's my quick overview of Onslaught to Orsha 2, another high quality product from Bounty Fire Productions that's available now. Like I said in a previous video, I'm a bit of a collector. Hopefully one day I will be able to play this, at least solo or with somebody. So that's my dream these days. So until next time, roll low.